A single joke changed everything. For months, Ethan Carter believed he understood exactly what Clara Bennett meant to him. She was his neighbor, his favorite opponent in every argument, and the one person in Silver Creek who never hesitated to challenge him. He told himself that was all it was. Friendship. Nothing more. Then one autumn evening, one careless joke and one unexpected reply would force him to face a truth he had been avoiding for months. Silver Creek, Montana, 1882. Ethan Carter owned one of the largest cattle ranches in the valley. At 33 years old, he had spent most of his life working the same land his father and grandfather had worked before him. He was dependable, hardworking, respected by everyone in town, and completely unaware that nearly half of Silver Creek had already decided who he was going to marry. Across the creek lived Clara Bennett. Clara owned 40 acres of farmland, a thriving vegetable garden, and a collection of chickens that seemed determined to create trouble wherever they went. She was 28 years old, intelligent, independent, and possessed a sharp sense of humor that made every conversation with her impossible to forget. Their story began because of a chicken, a real chicken, a stubborn red hen that repeatedly crossed the fence separating their properties. One bright spring morning, Ethan spotted the bird pecking happily in his pasture. He leaned against the fence and waited. Sure enough, a few minutes later, Clara appeared carrying a basket of vegetables. "Your chicken is trespassing again," Ethan called. Clara looked at the hen and smiled. "She's exploring. She's on my land." "Perhaps your land is more interesting." Ethan shook his head. "At this rate, I'm going to start charging rent." Clara laughed. "Good luck collecting it." The argument lasted 10 minutes. Neither of them actually cared about the chicken. What they cared about was having another excuse to stand at the fence talking. The hen crossed again 2 days later, then again the following week. Every time Ethan complained, Clara arrived with a new explanation. Every time Clara defended the bird, Ethan invented a new reason why she was wrong. By the beginning of summer, their arguments had become one of Silver Creek's favorite forms of entertainment. People paused outside the general store just to listen when they happened to meet in town. Neither Ethan nor Clara seemed bothered by the attention. The truth was that both secretly enjoyed it. One afternoon, Ethan discovered his horse wandering through Clara's vegetable garden. The animal had already destroyed several rows of carrots before Ethan managed to catch it. Clara arrived just in time to witness the disaster. She stared at the damage. Then she looked at Ethan. "Your horse has expensive taste." Ethan rubbed the back of his neck. "Apparently. He ate half my carrots. He was probably helping with quality control." Clara gave him a look so perfectly unimpressed that Ethan burst out laughing. He paid for every damaged vegetable and delivered extra supplies to her farm the following week. Clara accepted them with a smile, but reminded him that his horse was still banned from her garden. Throughout the summer, their friendship grew without either of them acknowledging it. Ethan found reasons to visit Clara's property more often than necessary. Clara somehow always seemed to appear whenever Ethan was repairing fences near the creek. They talked about everything: ranching, weather, crops, town gossip, dreams, memories, the future. Sometimes they argued for an hour without realizing how much time had passed. The people of Silver Creek noticed. Small towns always notice. Rumors spread quickly. Some believed Ethan and Clara were secretly courting. Others believed they were engaged in the longest feud in county history. Most eventually decided it was probably both. Ethan denied every accusation. Whenever his friend Samuel mentioned Clara's name, Ethan insisted there was nothing unusual happening. "She's my neighbor," he said repeatedly. Samuel never looked convinced. "You spend more time with her than anyone else. We share responsibilities along the creek. You inspected that creek 12 times this month. It's an important creek." Samuel laughed every time. The truth was simple. Ethan enjoyed Clara's company more than he enjoyed anyone else's. He liked her confidence. He liked her intelligence. He liked the way she challenged him. Most of all, he liked that she never treated him differently because he was a ranch owner. She disagreed with him whenever she felt like it and expected him to do the same. Clara felt something similar. She respected Ethan because he listened. Even when they argued, he listened. Even when he disagreed, he considered her opinion seriously. That mattered more than he realized. Neither spoke about their feelings. Neither seemed willing to take the first step. Summer slowly became autumn. Golden leaves appeared along the creek. The air turned cooler. The harvest season arrived. Then came the annual harvest social at the Silver Creek Community Hall. Nearly everyone in town attended. There was music, dancing, food, and enough conversation to last until midnight. Ethan arrived with Samuel. Clara arrived with her friend Rebecca. The moment they entered the hall, they spotted each other. Neither was surprised. Somehow they always seemed to find one another in a crowd. "Clara," Ethan said. "Ethan, how's the chicken?" "Planning something." "That's concerning." "Very," they laughed. Then they stood together near the dance floor talking as naturally as breathing. Neither noticed how many people were watching. Across the room, Samuel exchanged a knowing look with Rebecca. Neither said a word. Neither needed to. The music filled the hall while conversations echoed from every corner of the room. Ethan. Carter stood beside Clara Bennett near the edge of the dance floor, completely unaware that most of Silver Creek had already stopped wondering whether they belonged together and had moved on to wondering how long it would take them to realize it themselves. Clara held a glass of lemonade while Ethan leaned casually against one of the wooden support beams. Their conversation flowed as easily as it always did. They discussed harvest yields, weather predictions, a broken fence near the creek, and eventually the famous red hen that had accidentally become one of the most talked about animals in town. "She's behaving herself lately," Clara said. "That's suspicious," Ethan replied. "Exactly what I was thinking." Clara smiled. "I'm glad we agree on something. Don't get used to it." Before Clara could answer, a young man approached them. His name was Daniel Reed, a newcomer who had arrived in Silver Creek only a few months earlier. He was polite, well-dressed, and completely unaware of the history standing in front of him. "Miss Bennett," Daniel said, offering a respectful smile, "would you care to dance?" Clara blinked in surprise. Ethan felt something uncomfortable settle in his chest. It was a strange feeling. Sharp, unexpected, unwelcome. He watched Daniel waiting for an answer. Clara glanced toward Ethan for only a second, but somehow that second felt much longer. Ethan immediately understood something he had never allowed himself to understand before. He did not want her dancing with Daniel Reed. He did not want her smiling at Daniel Reed. He certainly did not want Daniel Reed looking at her the way he was looking at her right now. Unfortunately, Ethan Carter was still Ethan Carter. Instead of saying anything useful, he made a joke. "You should probably accept," he said casually. "At this rate, you'll never get married if you keep turning people down." He meant it playfully. It was the sort of teasing remark they exchanged all the time. Clara looked at him. Something changed in her expression, not dramatically, just enough for Ethan to notice. Then she smiled. It was not her polite smile. It was the real one. The smile she reserved for moments when she knew something other people did not. She stepped slightly closer, close enough that only he could hear her next words. "Only if you ask me." Ethan's heart stopped. For one impossible second, the entire room seemed to disappear. The music faded. The voices vanished. There was only Clara standing in front of him. Then she stepped back. "Thank you for the invitation," she told Daniel politely. "But I think I'll sit this dance out." With that, she turned and walked toward the refreshment table, as though nothing unusual had happened. Ethan remained exactly where he was. Daniel looked confused. Samuel looked delighted. Rebecca nearly choked on her drink. Ethan watched Clara disappear into the crowd. 3 words. That was all she had said. 3 words, delivered so calmly that nobody else would have realized their importance, but Ethan understood. Or at least he was beginning to. Daniel cleared his throat awkwardly. Should I ask someone else? Ethan nodded slowly. That would be wise. Daniel left. Samuel appeared beside him. Almost immediately. What happened? Ethan stared across the room. I'm not entirely sure. Samuel followed his gaze toward Clara. That's not true. Ethan remained silent. Samuel smiled. About time. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Ethan and Clara spoke several more times, but neither mentioned what had happened. Clara behaved exactly as she always did. Calm, relaxed, cheerful. Ethan, however, spent the entire night replaying those 3 words in his mind. Only if you ask me. By the time he left the harvest social, the stars had already filled the Montana sky. The road home was quiet. Normally, Ethan enjoyed the peaceful walk. Tonight, his thoughts refused to leave him alone. He replayed every conversation from the past year, every argument, every laugh, every moment spent standing by the fence, every unnecessary trip to the creek, every excuse he had invented just to see her. Slowly, painfully, the truth became impossible to ignore. Clara had not surprised him because of what she said. She had surprised him because deep down he had already known. He had known for months, maybe longer. He stopped walking, in the middle of the road, and looked up at the stars. The valley stretched silently around him. Cold autumn air filled his lungs. For the first time, he admitted something to himself. He loved Clara Bennett. The realization should have frightened him. Instead, it felt strangely peaceful, like finally reaching the end of a journey without realizing you had been traveling. He laughed softly. You stubborn fool, he muttered to himself. All this time, he had been looking for reasons not to admit it. All this time, Clara had been standing right in front of him, waiting patiently, giving him every opportunity. He continued walking home. When he reached the ranch, he sat alone on his porch long after midnight. The lamp in Clara's farmhouse glowed faintly across the creek. Ethan found himself staring at it. He wondered whether she was awake. He wondered whether she was thinking about the same conversation. Most importantly, he wondered whether she meant exactly what she had said. Deep down, he already knew the answer. The question now was whether he was brave enough to do something about it. Ethan Carter slept very little that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard Clara's voice again. Only if you ask me. By sunrise, he had reached a conclusion that should have taken him months, but somehow felt obvious now. He was finished pretending. Finished making excuses. Finished hiding behind jokes and arguments. If Clara Bennett had been brave enough to tell him the truth, then he needed to be brave enough to tell her his. The next morning arrived cold and bright. Golden sunlight stretched across the valley while a light breeze moved through the tall grass. Ethan stood outside his ranch house holding a cup of coffee and staring toward the creek. Normally, he spent Sunday mornings planning ranch work. Today, he could think about only one thing: an hour. Later, he crossed the property line carrying a toolbox and several fence boards. The excuse was simple. A section of Clara's southern fence had needed repairs for weeks. If anyone asked, he was there to fix it. If Clara asked, he suspected she would see through the excuse immediately. Sure enough, she was already working in her garden when he arrived. She looked up and noticed the toolbox. Then she smiled. Good morning. Morning. Her eyes moved toward the fence boards. Planning a construction project? That fence section needs fixing. I know. I figured I'd help. Clara nodded slowly. How generous of you. Ethan immediately knew she understood exactly why he was there. Somehow that made him even more nervous. He spent the next hour repairing the fence while Clara worked nearby. Occasionally they exchanged comments about the weather or the harvest. Neither mentioned the harvest social. Neither mentioned the conversation. Yet both Them knew it was waiting. Eventually, the repairs were finished. Clara brought 2 cups of coffee and sat on the fence rail overlooking the creek. Ethan joined her. For several minutes, neither spoke. The silence felt comfortable, not awkward. It always had. Finally, Ethan placed his coffee cup beside him. "I've been thinking." Clara raised an eyebrow. "That sounds serious." "It is." She waited. Ethan took a slow breath. "About what you said at the social." Clara looked toward the creek. "Have you?" "Quite a lot." "And?" Ethan laughed, quietly. "And I realized something embarrassing." "Only one thing?" "Probably several things." That earned a smile. Ethan looked at her. "The truth is, I've been slow. Very slow. Painfully slow. Remarkably slow." He nodded. "That too." Clara tried not to laugh. Ethan shook his head. "I kept convincing myself there was nothing there. Even though there was. Even though there was. For months. For months." Clara folded her arms. "Goodness, Ethan. It's almost impressive." He smiled despite himself. Then his expression softened. "I was afraid." Clara blinked. That answer surprised her. Ethan looked down briefly before continuing. "I've never had trouble making decisions about cattle, land, or business. But you mattered. That made it different." Clara remained quiet. Ethan met her eyes. "The truth is that I look for you every day." Clara's smile disappeared, replaced by something softer. "You do?" "I notice when your lamp is on at night." "Oh. I find reasons to visit the creek." "I suspected that." "I enjoy every argument." "I definitely knew that." Ethan laughed. Then his voice became serious. Again. "And I realized yesterday that the best part of every day is usually the part that includes you." Clara stared at him. For once, she seemed unable to think of a clever response. Ethan continued. "I don't know exactly when it happened. Somewhere between the chicken arguments and the vegetable garden disaster, I stopped thinking of you as simply my neighbor." The morning breeze moved gently through the trees. Neither looked away. "Clara Bennett," Ethan said quietly, "I'd like to spend the rest of my life arguing with you." Clara burst into laughter. Genuine, bright laughter. Ethan grinned. "That came out differently than I planned." "No," she said. "It came out exactly right." For a moment, neither spoke. Then Clara reached for his hand. "Good," she said softly. "Because I'd like to spend the rest of my life arguing with you too." Ethan felt a weight disappear from his shoulders. Months of uncertainty vanished in a single second. "So that's a yes?" Clara smiled. "That depends." Ethan groaned. "Depends on what?" "Will you actually ask the question?" He laughed. "Fair point." Ethan stood and offered his hand. Clara took it and stood beside him. The creek flowed quietly behind them while sunlight covered the valley in gold. "Clara Bennett," he said, "will you marry me?" Her eyes shined with happiness. "Yes." Ethan kissed her, forehead gently. For a moment, the entire world felt perfectly still. News traveled through Silver Creek faster than anyone thought possible. By sunset, nearly every resident already knew. Samuel collected several dollars from people who had lost bets. Rebecca declared she had expected this outcome all along. The owner of the general store claimed she had predicted it months earlier. Nobody was surprised. The wedding took place the following spring beneath a clear Montana sky. Friends and neighbors filled the valley. Laughter echoed across the fields. Even the famous red hen somehow appeared during the ceremony and wandered proudly between the guests as if she deserved credit for the entire romance. Perhaps she did. Years later, people still told the story. Not about the proposal, not about the wedding. They told the story about the chicken that crossed a fence and the 2 stubborn neighbors who kept finding reasons to argue until they finally admitted they were in love. And whenever someone asked Clara when she first knew Ethan was the one, she always smiled and gave the same answer. Long before he asked, the end.